Welcome back, everyone, to the things we know. Today, we are going to dive into a topic that feels especially relevant as the holidays. I don't know what's wrong with my mouth today. As the holidays and winter months approach, and it's the topic of loneliness. This time of year, we can often amplify feelings of loneliness, and that's something we really want to talk about today.
Yeah, and I mean, loneliness is complex. It's not just about being alone. It's about feeling disconnected, even if you are surrounded by people that love you. So I think it's really loneliness. It, like most things, is about looking inward and seeing, what do we have a connection to ourselves? Are we doing the things that light us up? Um, and if not, how can we shift that?
Yeah, man. I mean, I can relate to that. I know like I have a lot of people in my life who live alone and they'll there's some things I really envy about that. And they'll be like, yeah, but sometimes I feel really alone. And I have a lot of empathy, like a lot of sympathy for that. I really understand that. But then I can also relate to the idea like, even in relationships, when you're living with others, it's entirely possible to, like, despite the physical presence of people, feel really isolated.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's about like what is your connection with yourself, others in the world, right? I think I definitely have been there, especially like when I first had a kid. It wasn't like, I mean, yes, all the bliss, all the joy, but also like I felt so isolated. It's like everything looks fine on the outside, but on the inside, I was kind of floating. Like, who am I now? And when he's napping, I like, what do I do? And I was probably sleep deprived too. That probably led to some of it, but definitely can relate to that.
Oh, I mean, for sure. When I had Liam, I literally worked up until I went into labor. And then, I had obviously maternity leave, kind of decided on maternity leave that I didn't know if I could stay at work. And I went back to work and then I left work. And I didn't have a play group. I didn't because I had been a working mom. Like I hadn't like looked for all that stuff. And Darren was obviously at work. And so there was just a lot of time where it was me and a baby, and as much as I loved being with Liam and being a stay-at-home mom, I remember very distinctly, so interesting. My Darren and I were taking a walk one night with Liam as a baby, and I was saying to him, we had lived in Chicago at this point about 5 years, and I was like, I don't know if I can stay here. As much as I love Chicago, like I did not expect to raise my kids away from my family. And part of that was Darren and I had thought we'd move to Chicago for 2 years and then move home. And we were 5 years in. And of course we stayed 20. Um, and we got home that night and my sister called and said her husband had been gotten a transfer to Chicago. And that
Mm,
was just like, I mean, and she only lived there for 5 years, but it was enough to know that I was going to have some family around, that just kind of
yeah.
lightened the load and then made me go seek out a play group and so forth and so on. But yeah, first time you have a kid can be really
Yeah.
isolating for sure.
And the other thing I want to speak to, and I think we'll go deeper into this if we have time, but it's come up many times in our episodes, is I think I definitely can speak for myself and my peer group of people like I've raised kids with, both like the group that I went to college with and we had babies together, but like then the friends I made through my kids' school, is I think we thought that these years were going to be the best for us because our kids would be grown doing their own thing. We'd have all this time together. And it's way more isolating than any of us predicted. It could be made worse by COVID. I'm not sure. It could be
Mm,
just menopause is like also fucks with your emotions and your brain. But I do think a lot of people are working harder and more, and or they're traveling to see their kids more or something, but there's a lot less friend connection than people
mm.
probably imagined, unless they're really really making an effort, or they're like living, or maybe their best friends are their neighbors. That would have been really smart. I do like my neighbors though, but I just think that there is something also about this time of life where they're surprised at some of the loneliness.
Yeah, and I think, sure, I think COVID had something to do with that. We spent 18 months holed up in our house, with or without family. And whether you were an introvert or an extrovert, getting back out felt scary at the time. And so maybe things were lifted, but we were inching our way back out. I mean, I truly feel to some extent this last summer felt like really the first summer where everything sort of felt normal again, what or pre COVID normal, I guess I should say. But if you got really used to being home alone and a lot of us work from home and all of that kind of factors into this for sure. So I think COVID definitely had an impact. Um, Part of the reason we do this pod is so that women understand that what they're going through isn't unusual and we all are going through it. But if you aren't listening to this pod, you might think, your menopause can make your, like you said, emotions, but also your mental state, like everything can feel a little wackadoo. And you think
Distorted. Yeah.
distorted is a great term for it. And you just think, oh, I'm the only one going through this, so I don't want anybody else to know.
Yeah.
And all of that, like trying to handle everything on our own. We were just having this conversation with a friend of ours. It's like we can handle it on our own, but should we?
Yeah.
Because all of that turning it in and say, I'll just take care of it, I'll just take care of it can feel really lonely,
Uh,
even if you have a partner and kids and friends who are sitting there saying, I'm here. If you can't reach out, going back to our ask and receive pod,
yeah. Yeah. That's so true. That, yeah, you just nailed it. Okay, I want to talk. I want to say more of it than I think. Like, I want to talk first about like what does loneliness really mean, right? It's not simply I'm alone. Therefore I'm lonely because aloneness can be wonderful. Loneliness is more a feeling of being disconnected from something deeper.
Mm,
One thing I found really insightful from an article called Peaceful Mind, Peaceful Life is that loneliness can be seen as a signal from your soul. I love that.
mm,
Telling you to return to yourself. It's a moment that
mm.
invites us to reconnect with who we are and explore what brings us joy. I love this so much because it hasn't been long since our retreat. And that's what this
Yep.
reminds me of is I'm listening to what you're saying and thinking about, what we wanted to say today. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's exactly right. Loneliness is often just like, I'm not clear where I'm at, what I want. That can
Mm-hmm.
cause loneliness feeling. And I just need to be seen and heard and witnessed. And then instantly you don't feel alone. That's a huge difference. Like it is also such a desire of ours for ourselves and everyone we care about for people to learn how to totally enjoy their own company and to really like put boundaries around some beautiful alone time of self-care and self-reflection and self-love. That is totally not a lonely feeling. That is a like fill your cup kind of just nourishment. And that can only come after you've been witnessed and seen and heard and understood.
Yeah, no, I love that sort of reframe of loneliness because I do. I think you hear the word lonely, and in fact, you have a better song, but my initial song was thinking about the Beatles song, All the Lonely People, because and I hear that song and I picture, you know, people in overcoats walking slowly, not looking at each other, or a little old lady in a rocking chair knitting, that isn't necessarily loneliness. She could be really freaking happy that she's alone knitting, right?
That's so true. Or
But if
someone
you were,
eating at a restaurant alone, they might be
yeah,
having the most empowered thoughts of their life. Yeah,
totally. I actually, because you and I have traveled some and not necessarily gotten to places the same time, I've gotten to used to eating by myself, and it is quite lovely, especially if you sit at the bar and you talk to the bartender. Like it can be a really fun experience.
totally.
Um, but the loneliness, reframing loneliness to a disconnect to yourself. What I like about that is it is now in your control
Mm,
because you now have the option to go, okay, if I'm feeling lonely, what is disconnected? What am I not putting two and two together in my own life? And how can I be experiencing something different? If
mm.
you're always thinking, oh, I'm lonely because of outside sources, that's a lot harder, I think, to make change in. But if it's something you can start with yourself, like most things, it can shift.
Love that because it goes back to that idea, the signal from your soul. Like if it's trying to tell you something, ooh, that we're all so human, and so sometimes we respond to holiness. holiness. That's a totally different idea. Loneliness. We respond to loneliness with something to numb that feeling so we don't
Yeah.
feel it. And
Yep.
oftentimes that can lead to addictive stuff or things we don't really want to do, or like some time wasting that we then are later mad at ourselves about. But um, if you could, if we could all just be gifted with the wisdom and maturity that everything's temporary,
Mm,
even the like hard feelings are trying to tell us something. It's such an invitation to shift it.
yeah.
And yes, it's so easy to sound wise talking about it now. There's definitely moments where I'll be like, oh, and forget that that's temporary, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, in the moment, it can be take the wind out of you a little bit. So there's just some perspective that maybe comes in a little bit later around the temporariness of it.
mhm.
Didn't you had a sort of a scenario with a client, right? That
Yeah, I did. I was thinking about when like that was actually what she wanted to talk about in several calls in a row, like how lonely she was. And I realized that there was this it really had more to do with feeling like there was something wrong with her,
mm,
but not recognizing that she was an introvert, kind of having trouble with words today, an introvert, and needed like to really embrace how where she got her energy, and
mm,
and how like how they worked differently. And I think she just had him good, lots of friends, me bad, not a
mm,
lot of plans, right? And he didn't feel that way. And so it really just was such a beautiful opportunity for us to let's go deep on who you are. Like let's figure out who you
mm,
are and what lights you up, and like create plans and a structure around your life that supports that. And realize that you do have really great people in your life. You don't need a ton. And like how to like maximize that, and how to also take care of yourself when you are in social situations with your husband and not feel like there's something wrong with you. She was feeling lonely in those situations because she was trying to act like them, and
oh, interesting.
instead of just maximize the fact that she's a great listener and she was really funny, so the person sitting next to her was going to be delighted. So that ended up being really cool because it allowed her to really start to enjoy and even like really feel excellent about certain parts of her personality that were different in the room full of people.
Mm,
I
that's
love that.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So we've talked about reframing loneliness. How do we, what are the steps to getting out of it, I guess?
So I think the first is to shift it from being negative. Like
Yeah.
it just sounds like such a negative word. And I guess if you can't reframe it as not negative, at least see it as a signal, right?
Mm,
So it's not something that needs to be fixed. That's the other thing is like coaches, we kind of bum people out and excite them at the same time. And we're like, you're not something that needs to be fixed. You're not broken.
mm,
But we can approach it as an opportunity for reflection and growth, that signal. So there was a blog that I was reading, I think it's called Calm, and it said like loneliness can be an invitation to deepen your relationship with yourself. That really resonated with me because it's like this chance to pause, reflect, and find out what brings us joy again. Now, I get it. If you imagine yourself in a lonely, like self-pitying moment, like if you don't have anything to do or you don't feel like anyone's around, it's really hard to be like, well, I guess I'll enjoy me. But it's not like that cut and dry. It's not like, go play solitaire. I think it's a lot more about like how would I spend time with me if I was like a dear friend, if I was a cherished
mm.
friend? How would I what would I want to do at that time? And that is actually such a self-esteem builder, because you really do, when you can start to shift and see yourself that way as a dear friend, you can really like start to appreciate what's fun about you or what's safe and sweet and you know inviting about you. So I think reframing it as an invitation to enjoy yourself is the first step.
I love that. Again, I know we keep talking about the retreat, but we just sort of wrapped it up last night. And we had more than one of the women talk about how they wanted to be their best friend, that they wanted to talk to themselves the way they talk to each other. And so I think that's a beautiful way of looking at this. And as with most things, most of us are very busy. There's a lot of hustle in our life. And the idea of being able to get back in touch with ourselves and with our feelings. Like, I can imagine a conversation in one's head that's like, I don't have time to do that. Like, I just got to keep on keeping on, right? And that can make those feelings of isolation even stronger, even if you're constantly surrounded by people. If you're just hustling and moving, and you don't reconnect with what lights you up, what brings you joy, whether it is through self-care, reflection, something creative, uh, those things can be so healing, but you have to be able, as you already said, to stop and pause, take stock of what you need, and then make space for that in your life.
Yeah, that's a good one. You said pause, and I was thinking in both senses, like pause, and if you have a dog or a cat around,
Oh,
that helps too.
yeah, always unconditional love.
Yes. I think sometimes also it's about embracing solitude and not running from it, right? So
Mm,
instead of trying to fill emptiness with distractions, which is not at all what you were saying, you're actually like saying the opposite of distractions. It's like use the time to nurture yourself. You
mhm.
could distract yourself if that's how you want to call it, or redirect yourself is what I'd like to say, to like a walk outside, like change your
Yep.
environment maybe.
Mhm.
um like work with your senses. So if you're outside,
Mm.
maybe, you're going to have like sense of touch, like a breeze or something, or a sense of smell if you're cooking something, or, putting on tea. Maybe like just kind of just shifting some part of your sensory input is going to help a lot.
Yeah. And yeah, because again, if you're feeling lonely, I think the natural inclination is, well, then I need to be filling my time with more things, right? More people, more experiences. And the opposite may be true, that you actually need to take a moment and not fill any time up with anything. When we've talked about boundaries, right? And so when you say no to something, you get to say yes to something else. Perhaps if you're feeling lonely, that yes to the something else is you, and not another outing, another event, another whatever it might be to fill the time. Because in some ways, that's just another um it's another way of self-medicating that actually doesn't serve,
Totally.
you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about practical steps. Okay. I think the first one, like you said, is building that deeper connection. So, like we've talked about ritual recently,
Mm-hmm.
that is such a great like plan to have in place. It's not
Mm-hmm.
that different than when we were health coaching, like have a menu of choices ready. If you
Mm-hmm.
know that you're prone to loneliness when winter months come, or when the holidays arrive, or if you're somebody who lives alone and you want to kind of plan ahead and really just like, I want to be someone who enjoys my company more. I think rituals are such a great way to do that. Whether it's meditation, it's writing, it's yoga by candlelight, or like twinkle lights in your house. um, Something like that, even if it's just a like once a week way of like, this is every Friday morning I do this extra little check-in with how I'm doing and what I need and what I want. It can be really, really, really simple, but that's one way that like kind of flips the script on it. Like, ooh, what am I going to do with this lovely gift of time with myself?
Yeah, it makes me think of when we had Marie Jefferson Jones on, and the a girl's guide to dating herself. We had her on earlier in the
Yes.
year. She was generous enough to give us the books to give to our retreat participants in Chicago. But it's that workbook of like, how do I take care of myself? So that when I'm in a relationship, I'm also not feeling lonely, because I know how to self-soothe. I know how to self-resource myself, Um, and another practical tip is embrace it.
Yeah.
Try not to deflect or, as I've already said, fill the time. Finding comfort in those quiet moments um, can be. You might find new connections, new things that light you up, new things that make you happy, instead of always reverting back.
Absolutely. And this whole idea that we touched on earlier around like you might not live alone and you might feel really lonely. I think it was I swear it was one of the most heartbreaking quotes by Robin Williams where he said, the worst thing
Mm,
isn't being alone, it's being with someone and feeling alone, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So whether or not it's to fill your time because you might be spending it on your own, or to like not feel that way when you're with somebody, one of the things that I think this is all suggesting is like if you have a ritual of checking in with yourself, is finding your voice for that. Whether if you live alone, like how do you reach out and make a connection with someone that you at least want to get on the phone with, hopefully
Yeah.
maybe even see in person, and how do you like let the person, the people near you, like get to know what you need better, and how do you connect more? And it could be, could be something simple like a walk together, or it could be an important conversation. But I always think of like what are you contributing to that feeling? And I don't mean this as a
Mm,
blame thing, but like
yeah.
how might you invite that person in a little, and in a way that's also going to help you.
Yeah, because I mean, the reality of it is we are connected 24/7, 365, and lots of us spend time on social media comparing and despairing, and that's not real life,
Oh yeah.
it's just not. And so you may feel like, oh, but I have all these friends and all and again, we've talked about social media. It has been a godsend for me as I've moved across the country to stay connected to my friends that way. And I do spend quality time having phone conversations with friends and perhaps some Zooms and that sort of thing. So like anything with social media that or connectivity, there's an upside and a downside, but do not, again, going back to COVID, do not discount the power of having being in person and what the shift in the energy around all of that. So taking time a to make coffee dates, to make cocktail dates, to make lunches, whenever you can, for sure.
Yeah. I do think I know I always kind of tiptoe around this one, but gratitude is a good shift point
Mm,
if it's something that like, you can reflect on and it really brings you into a place of, oh, I love that I don't have to clean up after other people. I love, that I get to spend time in my garden and then like decide when and where I'm going to spend time with people. Whatever it is, gratitude, if it's a tool that really helps you kind of find your center and feel like you again, then yes, I recommend it. I never ever assign it as like you should be grateful, but I definitely think it can shift from loneliness into like longing to reach out to somebody really quickly.
yeah, no, I agree. And then I think, we've talked about being intentional with your time and not just trying to fill it arbitrarily. Um, it is so funny because I feel like a lot of our pods end this way, but it's the reality. Giving yourself grace as you go through this. If you feel like there's a lot of loneliness in your life, what we say here isn't going to magically shift it. You've got to be intentional about it, and along the way give yourself some grace and some self-compassion. Be gentle and just think of loneliness, as you said at the beginning, as a signal. Something in your life needs attention.
Yeah.
And you and I both do the wheel of life with our clients, and that's a beautiful way of looking at, like, oh yeah, maybe my social life feels really full, but what else in that wheel, what else in your life needs attention? So use that loneliness not as a deficit, but as um, a gift, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just gonna say that. Like I was gonna end with self-compassion because what I think what we've like the wisdom of our 55 years, and parenting other humans is that a lot of the harder feelings give way to the best inspirations, really, truly, like the biggest inspirations. And so if you don't let yourself feel those things, you might not make the exact decision you need to make in your life to go travel or to come home from travel or, this like whatever it is. So be gentle and just know that that's like if we let ourselves feel it, it's going to allow us to really get to the place that we really really feel the most authentic.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I know when I feel lonely that one of the things that makes me happy, surprise, surprise, is music. And you
Yeah.
picked another great song today to uplift the mood and sort of recenter.
Sometimes there's just no songs, and sometimes there's a lot. Like right now, I just was thinking of that song, Me, Myself, and I.
Yeah.
But no, I picked I Love Me by Demi Lovato. I think it was the line, I'm my own worst critic, but I love me. It's a great reminder that self-love and enjoying your own company is so key to reframing loneliness.
Yeah.
Next time you feel that way, it's like, but I love me.
Again, I just think about Michelle's her vow at the end of the retreat, which was, I love myself and I'm going to start showing it. I
Yeah.
thought that was a cool one. Um, yeah, I mean, there's no question. It's part of the human experience. We are all going to experience loneliness with or without humans around us. And so it doesn't have to be a negative thing. It can be a place for reflection and growth. We don't have to fall down a rabbit hole of despair. We can actually see how we can move forward when, as you say, we get that signal.
I love it. It's making me think of the movie Inside Out. Like sadness would be cheering for us right now. Like,
Yeah.
nostalgia, sadness, all that. All good.
I love it. Well,
Got
that's
lipstick
it.
on my teeth.
Yeah. And that also happens because,
Yes.
we're human. Well, another important topic, if I may say so myself, I'm glad we touched base on it. We went back and forth a little bit, like, how do we want to talk about this? Because again, women at this age, we do seem to fight against it, and it kind of goes to next week's topic, which is having adult children. If all of a sudden you're empty nesting and your identity has been pretty tightly wound as a mom or a caretaker, it can be when they leave, it can feel really lonely. So we'll be back next week to talk about that.
Thank
Thanks,
you for being with
everyone,
us.
for
Thank
listening.
you.
And we'll be back next week. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.